Hey everybody, welcome in To The Point. Hope you're doing well on this Wednesday evening. So much to talk about today, so much to get into with all of you surrounding the world of sports. 2 nights away from the end of the NHL regular season, but we got a lot to talk about with the NHL today, a lot happening, and some wild finishes, which was fantastic last night. We're going to talk NBA with the playing games. Felt like the end of an era, end of a dynasty last night in Golden State, losing to the Sacramento Kings. And we're going to talk some baseball at the tail end of the show as well. A lot of teams are 500, if you didn't notice. A lot of teams kind of right in the middle of the pack, nobody really jumping out yet. We'll also talk about the Blue Jays turnaround as of late, and they are currently in the background of me doing this. They're currently leading 2-1 over the Bronx Bombers, the Yankees, looking to sweep them for the first time in 3 years. But I've been saying I want the NHL regular season to end. And I stick behind that point because I'm ready for the playoffs. I'm ready for the best teams. I'm tired of seeing Chicago. I'm tired of seeing the Anaheim Ducks, Columbus. And I want to see the best boys play. The best players on each individual team meeting up, best of 7, mano-a-mano, figure out who truly is the best here. All that being said, last night was fantastic theater. It was captivating. And if you were watching hockey from 8 o'clock on, really the past 2 nights, you were watching something interesting. You were watching something that could have went in a multitude of different ways. Crazy finishes, crazy things happening, chasing streaks. And I want to start by talking about the Washington Capitals, who I've labeled the worst team to ever make the playoffs in NHL history. They have a negative 40 goal differential for the season, which is the worst in a playoff team in NHL history. They're old. They're not what they used to be. They have a starting goaltender that was in the American Hockey League for the majority of his career, Charlie Lindgren. Incredible run by him, but not exactly Mr. Brand name, not exactly Mr. Stanley Cup. And yet the Capitals, in the past 4 days, defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning, defeat the Boston Bruins, and then get some luck and defeat the Philadelphia Flyers. Wasn't perfect. They needed a lot to go their way, but they conquered, they found a way, and they're in the playoffs. Alex Ovechkin was on a 50-goal pace in the second half of the season following a dreadful first half. From February on, Charlie Lindgren had the best save percentage in the NHL. Crazy. John Carlson was third in the NHL in points by a defenseman, third in ice time. Sonny Milano steps up. Hendrix Lapierre, former Bathurst Titan, steps into the lineup, plays a role, is on the team when they're going on this deep run. And yet, it's a phenomenal story, but how they got here is something completely different. Because, yes, they edged Boston, Lindgren getting a shutout. Yes, they beat Tampa. They beat Tampa in a close game on Saturday afternoon. But through all those bounces, through things going their way, we get to last night. Going in, we know this. They have to beat the Philadelphia Flyers. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers. They are postseason bound. It's that simple. but they're not a great team. Philadelphia is a couple points behind them. Philadelphia needs to win, needs a lot of things to go their way to make the playoffs, but they are still in the mix. So we're going through the game. Good things happening for the Capitals. Ovechkin strikes first, but then Eric Johnson ties the game, middle of the second period. We go through the third. Both teams with decent scoring chances. But we're getting towards the tail end of the game. And the Flyers need to win in regulation. The game going to overtime does not serve them. They cannot afford to give the Capitals the points. They need to get all of them in this game. And John Tortorella pulls the goalie, hoping to score before the end of regulation. The correct decision, the only decision, and ultimately TJ Oshie scores an empty net goal and the Capitals win the game 2-1. Now here's the twist of fate. Before that took place in Montreal, the Detroit Red Wings, who are on this improbable run, Saturday, they are in Toronto, up 4-1, then blow that lead to make it 4-4. They ultimately beat the Toronto Maple Leafs in overtime following a goal by Dylan Larkin on the power play to save their season. If they don't win that game, if they do not get the 2 points, they're eliminated. Then we go to Monday night. They are down to Montreal. Now they're hosting Montreal. They're down to Montreal late. Lucas Raymond ties it up with under a minute and a half left to push it to overtime. They have to win the game. They need both points to keep their season alive. In overtime, 23 seconds, following this incredible rush where Suzuki gets robbed by the Lion King, Alex Lyon. They go back down the ice, and Lucas Raymond, who's been the hero, he scored 6 goals in the last 3 games. He gets the overtime winner to keep their season alive, and Detroit plays in Montreal the next night, home and home. Before Washington and Philly had the goalie pull, had the situation that ultimately defined where this ends, Detroit is down, but Montreal ices the puck with 7 seconds remaining. It looks like it's over. Faces are dejected on the bench. But Larkin wins the draw. Gostisbehere passes the puck to David Perron, who's playing the point on this shot. He goes bullet, top shelf, to tie the game with 3.3 seconds remaining. If the Flyers knew that the Red Wings had tied the game, they would have no reason to pull the goalie because they are mathematically eliminated. If Detroit gets 2 points, if Detroit or Washington get a point against the Flyers, they are out. Cannot get in. It's their last game of the season. They have no other options. They needed to win. They needed the Red Wings to not get a point. They needed to beat the Capitals in regulation. I hope you're following me. It is a bit complicated. But Detroit ties the game. They're going to overtime, meaning the Flyers are mathematically eliminated, and they had no reason to pull the goaltender. But John Tortorella said after the game, he did not know this. He had not received word from people up above. They did not know the score of that game. He pulled the goalie, and the Capitals get into the playoffs. We don't know how that game goes. This is how this works. If the Capitals lose in overtime or the gimmick, because the Red Wings won in the gimmick from a goal by Patrick Kane, I believe, they are done. Wings are in. Wings are in. Capitals would not be. We'll never know how that would have went because we didn't get to see the end of it. We didn't get to see the Capitals play the Flyers 4-on-4 gimmick, however it would have been. Shades of back in early 2000s, Leafs, Islanders. If you're a Leaf fan, you'll remember this. Games goes to a gimmick. It's about 8-9 rounds, and the Islanders win that shootout game. And because of it, because the Leafs didn't get the 2 points, they didn't get in. But the Capitals get in because the Flyers did something they technically did not have to do. Now, Keith Jones, Danny Briere, the brass for the Flyers. I don't think they had a job to do in that moment because I think you have to let your coach the team. Let him make the decisions and you play the game as if you still have a chance. Because if they don't pull the goalie and it goes to overtime, the team knows they're done already. It's a dejected feel. They might have lost the game knowing, okay, we're screwed. We have no chance of going to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I want to let my team play it out. I'm not informing them. I would understand if they did. If you call down and say, you know what, hey, Red Wings are going overtime, we're fucked. And why don't we just play this out? If we can win our last game of the season, home ice, better feelings, Wings get in. And the Wings aren't in their division. The Wings really don't have a history with the Flyers recently. Capitals, Flyers. You could argue the Flyers have been jealous of the Capitals' success over the last 10, 15 years where the Flyers have really been this mundane franchise, haven't really ever had an identity. Sure, got to the Stanley Cup final in 2010, but that was a minute ago. It's almost 15 years at this point. So there's a lot there where the Capitals won a championship. So you might have handled it differently, but I understand it. It's unfortunate that we will never know. I think the Red Wings are a more exciting team. The Red Wings, seeing them play over the last little while, even though 2 of the last 3 games have been on the road, 1 in Toronto and 1 in La Belle Province, it felt like Hockey Town again. It felt like the people of Detroit had a purpose. This year, the Detroit Lions get to the NFC Championship game and they get so close to going to the Super Bowl. And they have a positive future. The Pistons, bleak. Pistons stink. Pistons are horrible. Tigers were early, mid-April, but they're not a bad team despite their play today. But to me, the 2 most important franchises in Detroit are the Red Wings and are the Detroit Lions. You have the football team and the hockey team. And the main reason I put those 2 together, yeah, you had the bad boy Pistons, and they were huge, and they won titles. But the Pistons, the thing I know about the Pistons the most in the last 20 years was nothing to do with basketball. It was about malice at the palace. It was about fighting. They've gotten first overall picks that have done nothing in the NBA, that hold no value. Cade Cunningham is a walking, emergency room. He's never available. He's never playing. Well, Detroit, if you go through their lineage, Gordie Howe, Yzerman, Lidstrom, McCarty, the Mule, Johan Franzen, Pavel Datsyuk, Henrik Zetterberg, Sergei Fedorov, Konstantinov, they had an incredible run. Detroit made the playoffs for 22 straight years, and it's been a long time since they've made the playoffs. So while I think Detroit would have been a better story, while I think they would have played better games in the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's not going to happen. Washington gets in. Credit to them. Credit to my guy, Alexander Ovechkin. Credit to first-year head coach Spencer Carberry, who had no business getting in, who was a guy, quite frankly, taking a job that wasn't ideal, wasn't perfect, a lot of holes, aging team. You might even look at it and go, here's a guy that's going to take a job. Team's going to suck, go through a rebuild, and will be fired before the team ever gets to the playoffs, similar to Jeff Blashill for the Detroit Red Wings, oddly enough, who's now an assistant coach in Tampa. He coached there a long time. He never got the team to the playoffs because the team was never good. The team never really tried to win in his tenure in Hockeytown. But credit to Carberry, credit to that group for doing it. And yeah, they're boring. And they get the New York Rangers in round 1. And I'm going to do a more thorough deep dive into the series when they're all finished. We know the East, the out West, we're still waiting a number of matchups. But when those are set in stone, I will talk about what's happening here and what I like, dislike, and who I have winning each individual series. But anytime you're the last team getting in, you're getting the President's Trophy winner, you don't have a great chance of winning that series. To be fair to the Washington Capitals, can happen. Boston lost in the first round last year. President's Trophy, they did lose to Florida. Different team, obviously, different makeup, different aspirations. But we'll see. I think you got to credit. I think there's a separation that you have to do. Do I think Washington does anything in the playoffs? I do not. Do I think there'll be a tough out for the Rangers? I do not. Early spoiler. But I'm going to separate what I think they'll do in the playoffs because you judge what you did on the regular season. I'll judge them with a high grade for getting in. And while I don't think they had a huge competition, the Flyers are not a good team. The Wings are close. They're getting there. They're getting better, I would say. But they're not perfect. And then you have Pittsburgh, who is in a similar position as Washington. We still have players, but we want to tank, but we want to be competitive because we have Sidney Crosby. But they're not a good team. They wouldn't have done anything against the Rangers either. So it doesn't really change the conversation. But you outlasted the other teams. You were consistent enough to get to this spot. You're guaranteed to have at least 2 home playoff dates, which is great for Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Washington Capitals. And you'll take it. Penguins don't get those dates. A lot of teams are not getting them. You do. Credit to them for getting there. And it was great theater last night in those games. What else happened last night? Well, we just talked about a 2-3 day saga. Let's go through another 2-day saga. Saturday, the Bruins beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. Games on ABC, ESPN, the mothership. And you're like, okay, well, Boston's got 2 games left. The Florida Panthers have 1. Boston's leading them by a point. Boston's in good shape. They got Washington, who does need a win, but Washington, no scary opponent. And the Ottawa Senators, who are a joke. Boston, in 2 games, scores 1 goal. 2 entirely different games. They didn't get 20 shots on Charlie Lindgren on Monday night. Last night, they had 22 shots in the third period on Anton Forsberg, I think it was. Ottawa, ready for them to be over. I think they are too. 22 shots in the third period. The Senators withstand it. And they get an empty netter from from Artem Zub, pardon me. And the Senators win at the TD Garden. Crazy turn of events. Didn't expect to see this happen. No points in 2 nights, meaning If the Florida Panthers defeat the Toronto Maple Leafs, which at least I know, I thought anyway, Stanley Cup playoff preview, 2 versus 3 in the Atlantic. Boston will win. They'll get Tampa. We have our Stanley Cup preview a couple days before it happens. And to make it even more interesting, my parents and my sister are at the game. And they obviously love the Leafs. I'm not watching that game because there's so many other interesting things happening, including the playing games, which we'll talk about in the NBA. But I'm not watching the Leafs. I'm like, okay, whatever. This game, I'll see it 7 times in the next 2 weeks. I don't need to see it. But my mother's texting me, and she goes, oh, it's 2-0. I didn't care. I'm like, great. Toronto will win tonight. Hopefully 34 gets to 70. They can rest them tomorrow. That's optimal. But early in the second period, I see it's 2-2 all of a sudden. 2 goals in 3 minutes. And at the end of the second, it's 31-4, which was the most shots in a period by any team this season, which is fascinating. And from then on, I watched the third period because I'm like, okay, this means something now. Toronto was never really that close. Matthews almost scored, but I never felt the Panthers are going to lose the game. I didn't feel that much urgency from the Leafs in that game. Joseph Woll, man, he was like Leafs goaltending in general. He was okay, wasn't great. And Florida wins. Florida wins. So, Toronto versus Boston, Florida versus Tampa Bay. First thing off the top, the league, is happy with this. Toronto will do ratings with anyone. I understand that. But Toronto-Boston is the biggest market Toronto could have got in the first round. Meaning ESPN in the States, you're happy to get Boston against Toronto. There's a rivalry there. Boston has owned Toronto for a long, long time. The big brother, little brother. Can the Leafs finally slay the dragon? Losses in 2013, 2017, 2018, 2019, I believe. A lot of losses to the Boston Bruins. So you have that intrigue. And then you get Florida-Tampa, battle of the Florida teams. I think the league likes that as well. They have history. They don't like one another. A couple of years ago, Tampa beat Florida when Florida were the President's Trophy winners. Swept them, actually. So you have some intrigue there, which is fascinating. So I think the league, first of all, is happy with this. I texted this to people in my life who like the Leafs. They like them too much. Should figure something else to like. I don't know, knitting or... I guess knitting's kind of like the Leafs, kind of a sad story. But but I texted this to people that I felt needed to hear it. Boston is a better matchup for Toronto than Florida. Toronto played Florida starting Saturday. They would have lost the series. That's only my opinion, but I'm right about sports quite a bit. Not to toot my own horn. But Florida's a better team than Toronto. They have better defense. They have a better goalie. Okay, Matthews can score 70. He never scores that many goals in the playoffs normally. And Reinhart scored 57. That's not too bad on the season. Barkov might be the best defensive center in the NHL. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk, 4th most points in the second half of the season. I mean, they got a good club. And I think they would have beat Toronto. I think if they meet in the second round, they'll beat them then. Does it guarantee a win against Boston? No. It's not that easy, but they got a better shot. Boston's older, slower. Yes, they have more experience, but it's not like they've been winning lately. Boston has lost in the first round the last 2 years. Their center depth, which I think has been a problem all year long that they've never really addressed. Will that come home to roost? They have 2 goaltenders. Does that mean you really don't have one? Who's starting? Is it Olmark, who won the Vezina last year, or is it Jeremy Swayman, the goaltender of the future? It's not a cakewalk. The fact that the Maple Leafs are going on the road to start a series this year is a failure during the regular season. They should have won this division. They should have home ice at the very least. Again, they're not doing themselves any favors. They like to make it difficult, but that's the way they do their business. So that was a mistake by them. But this is where it is now. I think it's better off. I don't know what happened with Boston. Nobody can say definitively that Boston wanted Toronto unless Boston says it when the season's over. Do I think Boston wanted to lose last night? I don't. Boston, Tampa. Toronto, Tampa. Tampa's an easier opponent, I think. I think Toronto's better than Tampa Bay. Toronto beat Tampa Bay last year. So I think Boston wanted to win the Atlantic. I don't think they threw the game. I don't think they were thinking of that going in. So I think that conspiracy theory can be debunked. If you want to go with it, go ahead. The Maple Leafs want to use it for motivation, go ahead. But I just think they couldn't score. Other teams are playing with more desperation. Losing to Ottawa hurts. Because like I've said, the Senators stink. And they stunk from the drop of the puck back in October. But you lost to them. It happens. And I think both of these teams should be optimistic. I don't think Boston goes, oh shit, we didn't get Tampa, we're going to lose. Confident before, they should be confident now. Toronto, to me, should be more confident. Because you get an easier matchup in the first round. A series that you should be able to win with the roster that you got, despite the fact that Yarn Krok and Bobby McMahon and other players on their roster are a little banged up. Despite all of that, you should be able to overcome it. You should be able to win this series. We'll talk more about it on Friday when I preview the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think if you're a Leaf fan, you should be more confident about your team chances today than you were yesterday. So in the East, we have our matchups. Rangers, Capitals, Islanders, Hurricanes. One half of the draw. Other half, Florida, Tampa Bay, Boston, Toronto. We only got one matchup out East that we got in the first round last year, so I think that's a positive as well. You don't want that over and over again. Toronto and Boston did not link up last year. Florida and Tampa Bay did not link up last year. Islanders and Hurricanes did, so you get that again. But another congratulations to Patrick Waugh, who took over that team. Gets them to the playoffs. Puts them in position to play the Hurricanes. But I think out East, you got some better matchups. I think there's more intriguing matchups just as a whole if you're watching the series after last night's events. So I think you're happy about that. And ultimately, that's a positive for the league and the viewing experience because you want to watch the best hockey that you possibly can. Out West, still a lot to be decided. Only 2 nights left, but we only have one series locked in, and that's Winnipeg, with their win last night against Seattle, they will be hosting the Colorado Avalanche. Winnipeg has looked great as of late. Colorado's been horrible. Georgiev has an .842 save percentage in his last 10 games. Winnipeg beat Colorado 7-0 just last Saturday. And Colorado still has a game to play tomorrow, as does the Winnipeg Jets. But it's a meaningless game. We know that matchup. The out west, other three we don't know. We know Vancouver's locked up the Pacific. Edmonton is the 2 seed. They will get either Vegas or Los Angeles. And if Vegas wins tomorrow night against the Chicago Blackhawks, it will be Edmonton and Las Vegas in round 1. That means it will be Vancouver playing the Nashville Predators, which would be fun, quite frankly. And then Dallas and Los Angeles. I think that's a matchup Dallas wants. I think they want LA. They do not want Vegas, if all goes well. Although, could make the argument getting Vegas earlier on is better than letting them get healthy, letting them find their way. But LA has been a team that's been very beatable in the first round the last number of years. You could look at it that way and think you're going to win. But a lot decided. Rangers win the President's Trophy. McDavid gets to 100 assists, only the 4th player ever. Kucherov sitting at 99, 1 game left. They host the Maple Leafs tonight. So in that game that means nothing to either team, Kucherov can get to 100 assists, become the 5th player ever to do it. Matthews can score 70, become only the 12th player to do it. So chasing history there. But there's no game tonight on the NHL schedule that means anything for standings, for points, for any of that. Just finishing up your season, getting out of there. Now there's exit interviews, exit meetings with teams that don't make the playoffs. Montreal had one today. Ken Hughes, Jeff Gorton met with the media. They said it's the offseason to be more aggressive with our rebuild, time to spark it a little bit, try to build a better team. I think they saw some positive signs this year. Yurov Slavkovsky gets to 20 goals. Lane Hutson's played 2 games, but to me he's an NHL player already. Looks confident, can control the puck at the blue line. Yes, he's not a huge player. He will never be physically imposing. But the kid can play, and I think he'll be on the team to start next year. Nick Suzuki is a quietly really productive player. I think he can be criticized a little bit because you look around Canada and you see Connor McDavid as a captain, and you see Matthews as a pseudo-captain in Toronto, Brady Tkachuk, who's always in the news, in pathetic Ottawa. Winnipeg, they don't have one. Adam Lowry, but again, you look at Scheifele. Broad strokes, to me, Nick Suzuki can go under the radar in Montreal. And that can be a shame because I think he's a really good player. And he's never going to be a huge point guy, but he's got good hands. He can make things happen. If you look at his season, 77 points in 82 games, 33 goals. Not bad. Could he have been better? But to me, he had a good season. I like Suzuki. He's not the problem. But you look at him, might be playing for Team Canada at the World Championships. Cole Caulfield's playing for Team USA at the World Championships. They have some talent. I mentioned Lane Hudson. Figure out what they want to do with Jack Eye. Figure out what they want to do in net. Is Caden Primo their future number one goalie? They can look at free agents. Aging player, but he scored 40 this year. Steven Stamkos. Would he play for the Montreal Canadiens? Help them on the power play, help them score goals. You got Caulfield on one side, you have Stamkos on the other. Sounds like a deadly combination. Something to think about if you're the Montreal Canadiens going into the offseason. You don't want to overpay him, but he scored 40 this year. He's still got one game left. Could have more than 40 after tonight. Montreal also made another decision today. Marty St. Louis had a year left on his contract. But reportedly, in the fine print of that contract, he had a 2-year team option that they could exercise. And they exercised it today. So he now has a 3-year deal with the Montreal Canadiens. So he's in a good spot. They like him. He was a strange hire. And here's what I can say about the hire so far. I think a lot of people love it. I can't say I love it because he hasn't gotten the team to the playoffs, and the teams haven't been good, to his credit. But do I think the team competes? Yes. But he needs better talent. They need to figure out where they're going, who they are, what's their purpose. Because the last 4 or 5 years, their purpose has been lose so we can get a high draft pick and hope that he can play right away. And while Slafkovsky was looked at as this guy's not going to work, I think he's going to work, and I think he's a good player. I think he's better than Shane Wright. I think, the look at the guy, Simon Nemec, I like him in New Jersey too, but I think Slafkovsky's going to be a good NHL player. Will never be a superstar, but he scored 20 this year. Do I think he can score 30, 40 goals in the NHL? I do, 100%. So I think he's going to work out for the Montreal Canadiens. But if you're moving this forward and you want the team to matter, and I think 2 teams in Eastern Canada are kind of facing the same thing, we need to make our franchises matter. Montreal, Ottawa, both have not played really an important game in a long time. I don't think there's a point where their fans expected them to make the playoffs in a long time. Maybe Ottawa fans this year and they're pissed off, but before that, never. So all things being equal, Marty St. Louis stays. You keep that chemistry. You have your captain. You have Caulfield. You have some interesting pieces on the back end. Joshua Waugh, can he keep producing? Justin Barron, who was up and down from the NHL, AHL this year. I think they're moving in the right direction, but they still need players to go. They need Brendan Gallagher to get on a ship and paddle somewhere that's not Montreal. They need some team to take him, and I find that highly unlikely. But Brendan Gallagher had 31 points this season in 77 games. And for the people over 55 here, he was minus 24 on the season. He's not a productive player. He's not even a good player anymore. He should have got about a 10-game suspension this year. He only got 5, somehow. He's not worth it. This team has made decisions that have I didn't think Newhook was a great trade. Had an okay season. Logan Mailloux made his debut last night. I thought he played pretty well, honestly. He played 21 minutes. Thought he looked fine. Mike Matheson, bright spot for the team, 62 points. Great on the power play. Montreal needs to figure out where they're going, what they're doing, how long is this rebuild going to take? Because they don't have an identity, they don't have a purpose, and you don't want to be stuck in Ottawa territory for too long. Other news, Marc-Andre Fleury will wrap up his 23rd NHL season tonight, when the Wild host, or it's tomorrow, pardon me, when they host the Kraken. Be the end of his 23rd NHL season. Great, crazy career. Top 5 in wins, top 5 in games played, shutouts, everything. He's gonna be a Hall of Famer. But Minnesota announced today that Fleury's going one more year. He said, it's my last NHL season, my 24th. He signed a 1-year, $2.5 million extension with the Minnesota Wild. Keeps the door open for him to be a pseudo-starter. Philip Gustafsson, great last year. Not so great this year. Minnesota, a playoff team last year. Not a playoff team this year. They got talent. Some of it anyway. They're a team, I think, if they're healthy the whole year, if things went right the entire season, they could have got in. Looking at I love Matthew Boldy. He's going to have another 30-goal season. He's not going to win the Rookie of the Year, but Brock Faber probably should over Connor Bedard. And if you're a fan of the pod, you know I'm a huge Brock Faber fan. I converted my mother into a Brock Faber fan. And she likes hockey, but I converted her. 46 points, rookie season. Played 81 of 82 games. Not too shabby. Averaged 25 minutes a night. Only a -1 for everybody over 54. 15 power play. He was on 150 blocks. I mean, the kid can play. And you look at Minnesota, Kaprizov's a stud. The dude's phenomenal. Kaprizov, Boldy, Marco Rossi, Eriksson Ek, Faber. The problem is they have a bunch of older players that didn't stay healthy and couldn't really put. Marcus Foligno couldn't stay on the ice. Never does. Brodin injured for half the year, which caused Middleton to have to play 24 minutes a night too many. Goligoski, an aging player. Bogosian gets brought in mid-season. Again, not perfect. I mean, their back end, it's old. It's not very productive. They lost their captain, Jared Spurgeon, for the season as well with hip surgery. So that did not help them. Minnesota has holes. I don't think they're dead yet. They still have the problem with dead cap room with the Ryan Suter, Zach Parise buyouts. So that's still causing them problems. But with Kaprizov and with Zuccarello, you got something there. Still got guys that can play, guys that can compete. What did they do with Philip Gustafsson? .899 save percentage, .306 goals against average. Not a great year. Him and Fleury, do you bring them both back? The team could be in line for a rebuild, but you have Kaprizov. If you traded him, you get a boatload for him. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think Bill Guerin wants to do that. But it's something to consider. But Marc-Andre Fleury announced today, next season will be his last season. 1 year, $2.5 million extension with the Minnesota Wild. Good for him. Future Hall of Famer. Gets to finish where he wants to in Minnesota, and not everybody can do that over the course of their career. He was almost traded at the deadline. He said he wanted to stay in Minnesota, and they granted him that wish, which ultimately is a good thing. As I mentioned, not that many important games in the NHL tonight. Tonight you get Leafs Lightning with 2 third-string goalies between the pipes. Penguins Islanders. Penguins playing for pride at this point. wrapping up their season. No chance to get in. Islanders already locked in. Blue Stars. Interesting, Dallas is starting Jake Ottinger to kind of get him ready for the Stanley Cup playoffs. But again, they're locked in. First out west. Oilers, Coyotes. Oilers playing back-to-back nights. They're locked into the second seed. McDavid's gotten to 100 assists. Hyman's scored a lot of goals. But the interesting here is it's the last game ever at Mullet Arena in Arizona. It's the last game for Arizona as a franchise before they move to Salt Lake City. So emotional night for all 5,000 people that show up. I saw ticket prices. Most of them secondary market are going for over $900 because it's the last game. Putting together shitty teams for 20 years and you're still gouging people for their tickets. Despicable. I know the Mormons up in Salt Lake, they won't be doing that. They're too good to do that to the people up there. So at least they can look forward to that moving forward here. But last game ever in Mullet Arena tonight. Tomorrow night's games are the ones that really matter. Ducks, Golden Knights. Golden Knights win, third seed. They lose, the Kings win. Kings are the third seed in the Pacific. And the Predators are still waiting to see who they play because it's up to whether these teams win or not to find out who they're meeting up with in round one. Let's move to the NBA. Last night was the end of an era, the end of a dynasty for the Golden State Warriors. Playing game in Sacramento, 9 versus 10. You need to win the game to advance. And they got torched. They lost 118-94. Were never close, never felt like they were going to win. And it felt like an old team on its last legs. To quote Kevin O'Leary, you got to take it behind the barn and shoot it. The Warriors are done. The Warriors are no longer contenders. The Warriors are no longer a threat. If the NBA didn't invent the play-in game, the Warriors would never even be here. They wouldn't have played last night. Which really didn't even play last night. Steph Curry's still a great player. Didn't have his greatest game last night. He only had 5 points. At halftime, finished with 22 for the game. But he's not the problem. He can still play. Pretty much every team around the league would take him to be their pseudo point guard, even though he's not really a point guard. They would happily take him, and they'd be competitive. However, Klay Thompson played 31 minutes. He had 0 points. 0 for 10 from the floor, 0 for 6 from the three-point line. It was a year of up and down for Klay. Was taking out of the starting rotation. Has been kind of talked about as he's done in Golden State. They love him, but he's not the same guy anymore. He's not going to make big money in free agency. What happens to Klay Thompson? Is he kind of a specialty player now? I think so. I think last night was his last night in Golden State, his last game for Golden State. I don't see him on this team moving forward. Signing him to a contract extension is doing him a favor, is doing something that you shouldn't do just to make him feel better on his last days. Klay Thompson, I don't view as just a veteran's minimum contract. I don't think he's that bad despite his game last night. But he's not a max player. He can't be your second best player, third best player on a championship team. He's a guy that should morph into a guy coming off the bench that shoots threes and plays decent defense, but since his major injuries to his ACL and his Achilles, which he hurt in back-to-back years, he's not a great defensive player anymore. So he's limited in what he can do. Does Klay go to the Lakers? Does he find work with another team? I think he will. I don't think this is the end for him, unless he wants it to be. But it's over for him in Golden State. Second most threes in franchise history. 4 Larry O'Briens. Part of the best shooting backcourt in NBA history with him and Stephen Curry. A future Hall of Famer. You could argue the second best shooter in NBA history. But kind of Charles Barkley said this last night on Inside the NBA. Old players don't get better. Their bodies don't get better. Sports are a young man's game. And Klay's not a young man, and he's even worse off because of his huge injuries. As I mentioned, the ACL and the Achilles tear. The fact that he's still playing is something else. Proves how he's determined, proves how great of an athlete, and how much he wants and loves to play the game of basketball. But unfortunately, this is it. Golden State has to do 2 things. They cannot re-sign Klay, and they cannot re-sign Chris Paul. Chris Paul played 18 minutes, took 3 shots, and didn't really do anything else. 2 assists off the bench. Was never involved in the game. And Chris Paul's had a hell of a career. Again, another guy who is phenomenal. But he's 38 years old. He's undersized. He's another bench player that you're trying to fit into a starting role. You can't have him on your team. You can't have Klay Thompson on your team. Andrew Wiggins. In a perfect world, he's not on the Golden State Warriors anymore either. He was phenomenal when they won their title. He played like one of the best wings in basketball. He was that good, offensively and defensively. However, he's unavailable for a multitude of reasons, always personal reasons that are never kind of talked about. And if somebody's going through something personal, I get it. But I mean, when it's always happening, there's something there that I just don't trust. I mean, you look at it. Draymond's going to be 35 starting next year. Steph Curry will be 37 starting next year. Chris Paul's 38. Klay Thompson will be 35. You're not winning with that. They knew they weren't winning this year. They were just hoping they could get the 8th seed and make the playoffs. But Sacramento, I thought Golden State would win this game, to be perfectly honest. Because no Kevin Huerter, no Malik Monk. 2 really important guys, 2 really good shooters for Sacramento. But Keegan Murray dropped 32. De'Aaron Fox, 24. Sabonis nearly had a triple-double. They didn't even shoot that well, but they dominated Golden State. It was an ass-whooping. It was a no-show for the Warriors. I like Podminski, and Kuminga had a good second half, although I think you could get something for him in the trade market if you want to go that way and get younger. Looney, another guy who's kind of, you're done. When they were winning, he was playing big minutes. He played 8 last night. Moody. Their whole roster has the potential to be offloaded because does Steph Curry want to finish his career playing for a team that's not going to be competitive? Does he want to play for a team that won't win a championship again? That has no shot. LeBron was in a conference final last year. Yeah, they got swept, but at least they got to a conference final. This year, he made the playoffs again. We'll talk about that game in a minute, but he's in the postseason. Playing Denver, 1 of 16, you got a chance. Warriors are done. Heading home. Off until September when you return for training camp. Would Steph Curry want to play with LeBron next year? LeBron has expressed many times in the past that he wants to play with Steph Curry before his career is over. Would Steph want to go play for the Lakers? Leave Golden State? Stay in the Western Conference? Might sound crazy, but if the Warriors know they're not going anywhere, the Warriors know we're not winning a championship, they might look at it and go, hey, we can get some draft capital, get some younger players. Maybe there's somebody on the Lakers roster that they really like, that they could get in a deal. Rui Hachimura comes to mind, brings some size, range. Likely the only person they'd want because I don't really like the Lakers roster is not full of young prospects, which it shouldn't be with LeBron. But Golden State has some decisions to make. Steve Kerr got a 2-year extension this year. It's not going to be fun for him over the next couple in all likelihood. They could pivot, go the other way, try to get free agents to come to Golden State. But Draymond's still there. I don't think anybody around the league wants Draymond. He's too much of a headache. Doesn't play enough games, gets suspended, does stupid shit. But Golden State really defined the 2010s in basketball. They won the titles. They stopped LeBron from winning a number of them. Kevin Durant going to Golden State shook the sports world. Eliminated competition in the NBA for a number of years. But Golden State is out. Sacramento advances. They will play the Pelicans Friday night in a winner go home. Winner gets the 8 seed game. Lakers edged the Pelicans by 4. Game was a lot closer than it should have been. LeBron shot terribly last night, but almost had a triple-double. Rebounded. Beautiful assist. He played great, if you ask me, even though he shot 6 for 20. It's horrible. But I never felt the Lakers, even when the game was close, I trusted the Lakers. LeBron, Anthony Davis just looked comfortable on the floor. And Austin Reeves being that kind of third banana complements them well. Not to mention D'Angelo Russell was 7 for 14 last night, 21 points with 6 assists. In particular, in that first half, he could not miss. He was feeling it. If you look, Reeves with 16, Russell 21, Anthony Davis 20 points, 15 assists, LeBron 23, 9 and 9, Gabe Vincent, who's back healthy, 9 points off the bench. The Lakers have a team. They could be dangerous. They're motivated to get revenge against the Denver Nuggets, who beat them last year. And I think it'll be a closer series. I think the Lakers will at least win a game. We'll talk more about that later in the week. I think it's a much better series. It's more calculated, more of an even match series. Now, saying that, the Pelicans lose. And it was a strange, because the Pelicans are always injured. Brandon Ingram only played 24 minutes, shot horrible, 4 for 12. But he was on the bench late in the game. Valanciunas only played 20 minutes because he was a matchup nightmare and he couldn't knock down a shot. The Lakers were letting him shoot from anywhere. They were just sagging off, saying, "Go ahead, shoot it. We want you to take that shot," and he didn't knock down any. Zion was fantastic. Zion might have been the best player on the floor, and that includes LeBron, and that includes Anthony Davis. Finished with 40, 11, and 5, played 36 minutes. Was so dominant in the paint, could not be stopped. But late in the fourth quarter, he gets injured. We see him on the sideline, throws the towel in frustration. And we learned today it's a hamstring injury, and he will be out on Friday for their playing game. Not available. Maybe the best game he's played, but then you get injured and then you're not available moving forward in a game that they have to win to make the playoffs. It's just disappointing because this has been his career. You see signs of life. You see something that you love. You see Zion and go, that's the guy that was at Duke. That's the guy that was so phenomenal. But then he's not on the floor long enough to you to realize how good this guy is. Zion is out against the Sacramento Kings. I think that changes a lot. Sacramento, to me, despite being on the road, feels like they have the edge. Feels like they have the upper hand moving on here. They could go in there and win the game. And second here, pulling up FanDuel. It's not cooperating with me right now. Just a second. There we go. Looking at it here, Sacramento is a 1.5-point favorite tomorrow night in New Orleans, or Friday night in New Orleans, as they should be. Like the beam, absolutely like the beam, and I would take Kings money line as well because no Zion, Brandon Ingram, they don't play. There's just something weird there with him. I could see him being traded this offseason. Doesn't look body language. To quote Bill Simmons, the body language doctor, I'm not feeling it. And it's just sad for Zion. I just feel bad because he's such a talent, fun to watch, human wrecking ball. He was playing fantastic last night. Him and LeBron going back and forth was fun. Then he wasn't there. If he's in there, maybe they win. Because the Lakers were coming undone. And the Lakers had no answer for him. But he's not on the floor, and then Anthony Davis can score in the paint. They make another shot, and Reeves makes that floater in the lane. And before you know it, the Lakers are scoring 2 whenever they want, and the Pelicans are fouling, and who cares? And the Lakers win by 4. But the Pelicans get Sacramento, light the beam. Winner gets Oklahoma City in the 1-8 matchup. This evening, couple of NBA games. Miami Heat are in Philadelphia to play Joel Embiid and the 76ers. Joel Embiid was banged up, which he always is, on Sunday, but he will play. The Miami Heat have been inconsistent all year long. Can't count on them. Saying, oh, we'll heat up when we have to in the playoffs, and to their credit, they're in the exact same position that they were last year. Playoff Jimmy, does he come alive? Duncan Robinson, great three-point shooter. Tyler Hero's back. Their bench, can they produce? I think the Sixers win at home tonight because they're a better team. As good as Bam is, I don't think he can handle Jimmy Butler. Sorry, I don't think he can handle Joel Embiid. And I like Tyrese Maxey better than any Heat player right now, and that includes Jimmy Butler. I think it'll be a close game. The Heat will compete. Sixers are laying 5.5. 5.5. That's gone up a little bit since the last time we talked on Monday. I think the safest bet tonight is to take the 76ers money line. Just take 76ers to win. That's what I would do, because the Heat could cover and it's a 3-point game late and there's free throws and you never know. Plus, if Embiid, betting the Sixers is scary, but I'm taking the Sixers. But honestly, I wouldn't mind taking the Heat plus 5.5 because I think they keep the game close. And I think it's an entertaining one tonight. But I like the Sixers to advance, 7 seed. They'll get the Knicks in round 1. 9-10 playing game. This is a game nobody cares about. Hawks, Bulls. The biggest headline they could come up with for that game today so people would try to care is DeMar DeRozan's daughter is not going to be at the game. She was at the game against the Raptors last year screaming when the Raptors were taking foul shots, and that became newsworthy. She will not be in attendance, so she cannot get in the grill of Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. The Atlanta Hawks are better when Trae Young's not playing. That was kind of proven. They beat the Boston Celtics twice. They beat the Celtics twice when Trae Young was injured. The Bulls, better players, more options. DeMar DeRozan was one of the most clutch players in the NBA this year in big moments. This is a big game. A game you have to win. I got the Bulls money line this evening. They'll advance. They'll play the Miami Heat on Friday night. That was the 8 versus 9 game last year. I think it'll be the 8 versus 9 game this year. It will likely have the same result. But that's what I got today. I got the Bulls advancing, and the 76ers advancing. NBA also released a schedule for this weekend for Saturday. Great 2 o'clock, Magic Cavs, 4:30 Suns at T-Wolves, 7 o'clock Lakers, Nuggets. Knicks 76ers at 7, then at 9:30, Lakers at Denver. Fun day. You also have the Stanley Cup playoffs starting that day as well. So it should be an awesome sports day. Also 420 if you like to celebrate, so get your product before it's too late. Let's move to Major League Baseball. In the background, I got Yankees, Blue Jays. Yankees just took the lead on a 3-2 RBI double down the left field line by Aaron Judge, who was cold as ice the last little while. He gets a big hit. He's batting under 200. Yankees are trying to avoid the sweep by the Blue Jays. Early on, you see some turnarounds. Dalton Varsho, couple home runs today, 3 home runs in his last 4 games. He's been playing better for the Blue Jays. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. starting to turn the corner. Things are pointing up for the Blue Jays, I'll put it that way. You're also getting Romano back, Eric Swanson returned yesterday, so both guys back into your bullpen are back in their normal positions. Houston's had their ups and downs, haven't been great so far this season. Trying to find their way a little bit. They lost today in extra innings to the Atlanta Braves, who had big expectations, who are 12-5, having a great start to the year. Astros are now 6-14, down there with the likes of the Marlins and the White Sox, who stink. But the Astros will get Justin Verlander back this weekend. They've had a brutal schedule to start their years. I'm not completely panicked on the Astros yet, but I'm sure internally they're not thrilled with the way their season's going. But here's why, if you're a fan of a baseball team and you're like, God, we're not playing that. Well, we win one game, lose the next one. Here's why you shouldn't be concerned. I'm going to take you through baseball. There's a few outliers, pardon me. But for the most part, everybody's the same. Tampa Bay Rays playing this evening, 10-8. Very likely could be a game over 500 after the game against the Angels tonight. They won last night in 13 innings. Blue Jays, if they lose today to the Yankees, which they currently are going into the bottom of the ninth, they will be 10-9. Red Sox, 9-9. Play the Guardians tonight. You have your Guardians, who are great, 12-5. Royals, 12-6. Great start. How about the Tigers? 10-8. Rangers, 10-9. Angels, 8-9. Mariners, 8-10. They're playing currently. Game off. Oakland, 7-11. Great for them. Mets, 10-8. Phillies, 10-8. Nationals, 8-10. Cubs, 10-7, currently losing. Pirates, 11-8, lost today. Reds, 9-8. Cardinals, 9-9. Fifth in their division. Dodgers 12-9, haven't been that great to start the year. Padres 11-10. Diamondbacks 9-9, currently playing down to the Cubs. Giants 8-11, won today. Rockies, who stink, 4-14. But I just went through all of baseball, 30 teams. Over half of them are within 2 games of 500. The entire National League Central are bogged up because they're all kind of the same team. They're all okay, just okay, trying to figure it out. Phillies, you're just trying to win games. Not healthy yet, trying to figure out pitching. You have a really good team like the Orioles, who are 12-6, first in the AL East. Their top prospect, Jackson Holliday, has really been a nothing burger since being called up. He's batting .40. Has 1 career major league hit. But Gunnar Henderson's been good. Adley Rutschman, stud. Ryan O'Hearn's been great. Mountcastle's been decent. But you look at it and go, okay, they got their problems. Pitching's been okay. They're winning games. Brewers are 11-6. Brewers, Craig Counsell leaves. But they're playing good baseball to start the year. A lot of these things are going to change. A long season, 82 games. Aaron Judge just got a big hit against the Blue Jays. Will that be the turnaround of his season? Because he's been horrible to start. Stanton cranked a home run in the 8th inning, 900 feet. Does that make him a better player? Does he start to turn around a little bit? Soto's been fantastic. But my point here is it's a long season. So much is going to happen. There's injuries already. Half of baseball's starting pitchers are not available. Spencer Strider's done for the season with Tommy John. You have Garrett Cole, who might return. You're still working people out. The Blue Jays are trying to Kevin Gausman back to his regular form. Can he return to what he used to be? Philly's Zach Wheeler hasn't been exactly dominant to start the year. Give him a contract extension. He's your ace. Okay. Bryce Harper's batting .215. Schwarber's batting .217. Castellanos is batting under the Mendoza line. But it's about weathering the storm. It's about Phillies are 10-8. They were slow to start last year. They get to the playoffs. If you can get out to that big lead, if you are the Orioles and you feel good about yourself, if you're the Royals, the Orioles, that's perfect. But then there's just bad teams. Chicago White Sox are 2-15 on the season. Truly dreadful. In the bad division, and yet they still suck. They kind of made their fans believe that they'd be competitive. They're not. They never were going to be. Robbie Grossman, Adam Vaughn, Gavin Sheets, Eloy Jimenez all played before, all pretty terrible. Sosa, Paul DeJong, who bounced around last year. Lee, Nicky Lopez, formerly with the Royals. Third manager in 3 years. He's already talking in the media like he's so just devastated to be a part of this team. Sounds like he's distraught. Sounds like he hates his life. Buckle up, buddy, because you're going to lose a lot of games this year. Be a lot of games where there's nobody in the stands on the south side of Chicago. Won't help that you're losing all the time, that you want a new stadium and people aren't showing up. But a lot of teams are bunched up. A lot of teams are kind of the same right now. You're trying to figure out who you are. I just wanted to point that out because you're seeing just a lot of teams in the same spot. We're here together. No difference between you, and you. Tomorrow, RBC Heritage, South Carolina at Hilton Head, Harbortown Golf Links. Scotty Scheffler, I don't think he's had his kid yet. It wasn't reported anyway. He's playing in this event. It's an elevated event, so he has to show up and play. And it's got a great field. Groups tomorrow include Scheffler, Spieth, and they're playing in twosomes, which I love. Wyndham Clark, Sahith Theegala, Tommy Fleetwood, Max Homa, Justin Thomas, Kevin Kisner, Akshay Bhatia, Will Zalatoris, Corey Connors playing with Tom Hoagie, Patrick Cantlay, Seamus Power, Adam Hadwin. Tomorrow, you got Nick Taylor playing with Matt Fitzpatrick, fun group, Fitzpatrick, former champion. This event, McIlroy and Ludwig Aberg, Morikawa, Schauffele. Best players are present. Really good guys, beautiful golf course. Scheffler coming off the major, having a child soon. Fresh off a major, great golf tournament. And should be a fun sports weekend with the NBA playoffs starting, with the Stanley Cup playoffs commencing, baseball ongoing. You have an awesome fight Saturday night in boxing, Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia in Brooklyn. That should be fireworks. So that's what's forthcoming. Tonight, playing games. Wednesday nights, that means it's Survivor, if you're me. But we'll be back on Friday. We'll preview the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll look at every matchup, every series. We'll dive into it. Also look at the NBA first round as well. And anything else that comes up on the radar over the next couple of days. Thank you all for hanging out today. Appreciate the support as always. Until next time, this is To The Point.